Think about this for a second. Every single day, you take something like 23,000 breaths, and you probably don't think about a single one of them. But what happens when that simple, automatic act suddenly becomes hard work? Well, that's when you need a very specific kind of expert, the specialist for your lungs. So, who is that person? It seems like a simple question, right? But knowing the answer is absolutely crucial. When your breathing is in trouble, who is the specialist you actually turn to? The person you need is a specialist for the entire respiratory system. So let's dive in and meet this expert and figure out exactly what they do. And that specialist is called a pulmonologist. Now, they're not just any doctor, they're a medical doctor whose whole world revolves around the respiratory system. This isn't just a side hustle for them, it means years and years of super focused training on that complex machinery that keeps us all breathing. And it's so important to get this. The respiratory system is way more than just your lungs. A pulmonologist is an expert on the whole network. You've got the trachea, the windpipe that air travels down, then the bronchi, which branch out inside your lungs like a tree. And they even cover the diaphragm and chest wall, those powerful muscles that are basically the engine for every single breath you take. So, since they're the experts on that entire system, what kind of problems do they actually fix? Well, their work covers everything from really common issues you've definitely heard of to some of the most complicated conditions out there. I bet this list looks pretty familiar. Things like asthma, which so many people live with, or serious infections like pneumonia and TB. This is the bread and butter of a pulmonologist's job. They are right there on the front lines, helping people manage these incredibly common, but also potentially really serious breathing issues. But their work goes so much deeper than that. They're tackling everything from lung cancer to pulmonary fibrosis, which is basically a scarring of the lung tissue. And get this, they even treat sleep apnea, where your breathing actually stops and starts while you're asleep. It just goes to show you how your respiratory health impacts literally everything. Okay, wow, that is a huge range of diseases, right? From infections to cancer, all the way to sleep disorders. So how on earth do they figure out what's really going on inside someone's chest? Well, it turns out they have a pretty amazing set of specialized tools to work with. This diagnostic toolkit is what lets them become detectives, peering inside the respiratory system to find the exact cause of the problem. And this toolkit is really impressive. Of course, you have things like chest x-rays and CT scans to get a picture of what's happening. But then you have pulmonary function tests, or PFTs, which are fascinating. They actually measure how much air your lungs can hold and how fast you can blow it out. For a direct look, they can use a bronchoscopy, which sends a tiny camera right into your airways. And for something like sleep apnea, a sleep study is the only way to get the real answer. Okay, so this brings us to the most important question of all. We know who they are and what they do, but when might you actually need to see one? This is the crucial part of our explainer, the key signals your body sends that you really shouldn't ignore. The number one major signal is something that sounds so simple, but it is incredibly important. A chronic cough. The kind that just won't quit. But what does chronic actually mean here? Well, the medical benchmark that doctors use is a cough that sticks around for more than 3 weeks. See, that's the point where it stops being just the tail end of a cold and starts being a signal that something else might be going on. And the second major red flag is that feeling of being short of breath, especially when there's no good reason for it. If you find yourself getting winded from just walking up the stairs, and it's not because you're out of shape or have another known issue, that's a huge sign your respiratory system needs a closer look. So a cough that won't go away and getting out of breath for no reason, these are not things to just push through. Seriously, think of them as your body's check engine light. They're clear, direct signals telling you it's time to call in an expert to figure out what's really happening under the hood. Breathing is the most basic rhythm of our lives, and most of the time, we totally take it for granted. So the real question to leave you with is this: is it maybe time to start paying a little more attention